poor student, desperate for a way out. Married a 71-year-old wealthy woman, but just 7 days later, he discovered something that left him completely shaken. The skies over a quiet Texas college town were heavy and gray, the streets slick with fresh rain. Mark Davis trudged along the sidewalk, his backpack slung over one shoulder, worry etched deep into his young face. At just 23, Mark was barely surviving, balancing his final year in law school, a part-time job, and drowning in debt left behind by his late father. Every day, it felt like the world was tightening its grip around him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, jolting him from his thoughts. "Mark Davis speaking," he answered, his tone cautious. A poised, authoritative voice replied, "Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I'd like to meet with you. It's regarding your financial situation." Mark, "I'm sorry. Who are you? And how do you know?" "I know enough," she interrupted, her tone smooth and unwavering. "Meet me at Brooks Bistro, 7 p.m. tonight. It's important." Before Mark could respond, the call ended. Confused, and more than a little curious, he made his way through the rain to a cozy upscale cafe. By the time he arrived, he was soaked, his thin jacket offering little protection. Inside, warm lighting and the rich scent of coffee greeted him. In the corner sat Eleanor Brooks, an elegant woman with silver hair styled to perfection. She wore a tailored suit that quietly screamed wealth and influence. "Mark," she said with a nod, motioning for him to sit. Her voice was calm, but held authority. Mark hesitated before sitting across from her. "Mrs. Brooks, what is this about?" "Straight to the point." "Good," she replied, sipping her tea. "I know about your debts, Mark. The ones your father left behind. I know how you're struggling just to stay afloat. I'm here to offer a solution." Mark's brow furrowed. "What kind of solution?" She set down her cup and looked him straight in the eyes. "Marry me." The words hit him like a truck. Mark blinked, sure he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said, her voice steady and serious. "This isn't about romance. It's a business arrangement. I'll clear all your debts, secure your future, and in return, you'll be my husband." Mark let out a nervous laugh, disbelief washing over him. "You're serious? Why me? You don't even know me." Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp and unflinching. "Exactly. You're young, single, and desperate enough to consider this. I don't need love, Mark. I need a companion. Someone to carry my name, share my estate. Think of it like a contract." Mark shook his head, overwhelmed. "This is insane. What's in it for you?" For the first time, her expression softened. "I've spent my life alone. No children, no family. I want companionship, even if it's just for show. I want control over my legacy. A husband makes that easier." Mark stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. I need time to think, of course," she said coolly, "but don't take too long. The offer won't last forever." That night, Mark sat at the kitchen table with his mother, her face pale from ongoing treatments. The weight of medical bills, student loans, and his younger sister's college tuition loomed like storm clouds. After hearing about Eleanor's proposal, his mother looked at him with weary eyes. "I know it sounds unbelievable, but if she's truly willing to help, maybe you should consider it." Mark stared down at his hands, torn between his pride and his desperation. "You're asking me to marry someone I don't love, just to fix everything." "I'm asking you to save yourself," she said softly, "to save us." The next morning, Mark returned to Brooks Bistro. Eleanor was already there, poised and composed as always. "You've decided?" she asked, without looking up from her tablet. Mark took a slow, steady breath. "I'll do it." She smiled faintly, placing her tablet aside. "Good. We'll make the arrangements immediately." Exactly 1 week later, Mark stood in a small courthouse wearing a sleek suit Eleanor had picked out for him. The ceremony was quiet, witnessed only by Eleanor's lawyer and a notary. As they exchanged vows, a strange chill ran down Mark's spine. Something felt off. He couldn't shake the feeling. A strange tightness settled in Mark's chest as the officiant finally said the words, "You may now kiss the bride." Eleanor turned to him with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis," she said softly. As they stepped out of the courthouse, the rain had returned, now a light drizzle falling from the gray sky. Mark glanced at his reflection in a puddle near the curb. Did I just save my family or sell my soul? He wondered. haunted by the question. The cab rolled slowly up a long, winding driveway, its tires crunching the gravel path. Massive iron gates creaked open, revealing the estate ahead, a grand mansion that looked more like a historical landmark than a home. Towering columns framed the stone facade, and intricate ivy crawled up its walls like fingers from the past. Mark stepped out, suitcase in hand. The air was cold, and the house colder. It was beautiful, but lifeless, like a museum frozen in time. A dream for some, maybe, but for Mark, it felt like walking into someone else's nightmare. Eleanor greeted him in the foyer, her posture perfect, her presence commanding. "Welcome, Mr. Davis," she said, the formality of her tone giving him a strange chill. "I trust you'll find everything to your satisfaction. Dinner is at 7. Mark nodded quietly, following a silent housekeeper down a long hall. The room he was led to was lavish. King-sized bed, antique furniture, and towering windows overlooking a perfectly sculpted garden. But despite its elegance, it felt untouched by warmth. Almost sterile. Almost staged. That evening, Mark sat stiffly at one end of a long dining table. Eleanor sat at the opposite end, elegant in a silk blouse and pearls. The food in front of him looked like it belonged in a 5-star restaurant, prepared by a chef he hadn't seen, served by staff who moved like shadows. "I trust you're settling in," Eleanor said casually, slicing into her filet mignon with unsettling precision. "It's different," Mark replied, choosing his words carefully. "This place is so big, I feel like I'll get lost." "You'll get used to it," she said with a faint smirk. "Or you won't. Either way, you're here." Her bluntness made Mark uneasy. He shifted in his seat. "You never mentioned much about your late husband?" Eleanor's knife froze mid-cut. She calmly set it down and dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "He was a businessman," she said, her voice cool. "Like your father. Their paths crossed once or twice." Then her tone dropped. "But as you might imagine, not all encounters end well." Mark's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" She looked at him, her piercing blue eyes suddenly sharp. "Let's just say, unfinished business has a way of lingering." She raised her glass, her expression unreadable. "But that's in the past. You'll soon understand why I chose you." Her cryptic words echoed in Mark's head as he wandered the house after dinner. The halls stretched endlessly, lit by golden sconces and moonlight leaking through the windows. It was too quiet, too still, the kind of silence that felt like it was watching you. Several doors were locked, their brass handles polished and gleaming in the dim light. Mark touched one lightly, and for a second, he could have sworn he felt it breathe. As the days passed, the mansion only grew more unsettling. The staff avoided eye contact, their footsteps barely audible. But when they thought he wasn't listening, Mark overheard whispers, snippets that made his stomach twist. Why him? She never does anything without a reason. He'll figure it out. They always do. One evening, while wandering the massive library, Mark noticed Eleanor's desk. Papers were scattered across it, ledgers, letters, contracts, and among them, a small ornate key glinting under the warm desk lamp. It was beautiful, intricate, heavy. His eyes darted around the room. No one. His fingers closed around the key. Cold, solid, important. Could this open one of the locked doors? That night, Mark lay in bed, the key turning slowly in his hand. His thoughts spiraled. Why him? What is Eleanor hiding? What really happened between their families? The mansion was still asleep when Mark crept down the hallway, the moonlight guiding his path. The key felt like lead in his pocket, weighing down more than just his coat. He reached the door he had noticed before, the one with the ornate design etched into the wood. Slowly, carefully, he turned the key. Click. The sound echoed like thunder. He pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, untouched. Dust hung in beams of moonlight. The room was a time capsule. Everything frozen in another decade. Antique furniture, faded wallpaper, and a large desk cluttered with yellowed papers. Photographs in tarnished silver frames lined a shelf. One showed Eleanor as a young woman. Another, a stern-looking man, presumably her late husband. In one photo, they stood with another couple, one Mark didn't recognize. But what caught his attention was the stack of documents on the desk. Mark began flipping through them. His eyes widened. They were legal files, detailing failed business deals between Eleanor's husband and his father. At the bottom of the stack, He found a handwritten letter. The ink was dark and jagged, written with urgency. It read, "He stole everything from us, ruined us. I'll make sure his name means nothing." The signature was unmistakable. Eleanor Brooks. Fraud. You ruined everything. My family was left with nothing because of your lies. Mark's breath hitched as he scanned the handwritten words, fury dripping from each line, but it was the final page that made his heart stop cold. A marriage license, his name and Eleanor's, printed in bold ink, dated weeks before their wedding, far earlier than he'd ever known. Lying beside the documents was an old, cracked, leather-bound diary. Mark hesitated, then opened it. The entries were Eleanor's. Her handwriting was neat, elegant, and filled with venom. "He will pay, as his father never did. I will take everything from him, just as everything was taken from me. He will be my pawn." Each page was another nail in the coffin of their twisted union. Then, the door creaked behind him. "Enjoying yourself?" Eleanor's voice sliced through the silence like a cold knife. Mark spun around, guilt and fear painted across his face. "Eleanor, You thought you'd find answers in here?" she asked, stepping into the room, her figure outlined by the dim hallway light. "Curiosity killed the cat, Mark. What do you think you're doing?" He stood his ground. His voice was steady, but his insides twisted. "Why did you really marry me? Is this about my father? Some sick revenge scheme?" Her eyes darkened, the cracks in her perfect mask beginning to show. "It's not your place to ask questions. Do what you're told, Mark, and you'll leave this marriage better off than you started. Isn't that enough?" "No." His fists clenched. "You lied, manipulated me. This isn't a marriage, it's a prison." A slow, icy smile spread across Eleanor's face. "Prison?" she echoed. "Maybe you should have read the fine print before signing those papers." She stepped closer, voice dipped in poison. "You may think you're smarter than me, Mark, but you're just like your father, blind to the damage you cause. Until it's too late." Mark stared her down, every inch of him vibrating with the weight of betrayal. "You hated him so much," he said. "Why take it out on me? I had nothing to do with what he did to your family." For a moment, silence stretched between them, like a taut wire. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. "You're in over your head, Mark," she called back. "Stay out of matters that don't concern you." The door slammed. That night, Mark lay awake in the suffocating stillness of his room. Eleanor's voice echoed in his head, twisted with the words he'd read in her diary. Why go through all this trouble? Why now? Was it truly just about revenge? Or something even darker? Then through the silence, he heard it, her voice, software, urgent. Mark slipped from bed and crept through the hall to Eleanor's study. He pressed his ear to the door. "Make sure the transfer is complete," Eleanor said. "We can't let him back out now. Time is running out." "Transfer?" Mark's blood turned to ice. He stumbled back from the door. Whatever was happening, it was far deeper than he'd imagined. He was a pawn, but in a game he still didn't fully understand. The next evening, Mark sat alone in the grand library. The mansion, once a monument of power and beauty, now felt like a gilded prison. Eleanor's words, the diary, the locked documents, all of it haunted and needed help. He approached Mr. Harris, the estate's head butler, a quiet, composed man who had always seemed to hover like a ghost. "Mr. Harris," Mark said cautiously, "I need your help. Something's not right." The butler met his eyes with a calm, measured gaze. "I was wondering how long it would take before you came to me." Mark's breath caught. "You know, don't you? About her?" "About all of this." Mr. Harris hesitated, then nodded. "You're not the first young man to be drawn into Eleanor's world." He glanced down the hallway, voice low. "She's clever, ruthless. When she sets her sights on something, or someone, she doesn't stop. My advice? Watch your back." Mark's jaw tightened. "Then why stay? If you know what she's capable of," a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, passed over Mr. Harris's face. "Some of us don't have the luxury of walking away," he said softly, determined to escape the trap tightening around him. Mark reached out to an old friend from law school, Peter. Under the guise of catching up, he sent a message. "Peter, quick question. Hypothetically, someone signed a contract, like a marriage license, under manipulation or false pretenses. Is there a legal way out?" He hit send, his hands trembling slightly. He stared at the message as if it held a key to freedom. As the officers moved in to handcuff her, Eleanor didn't resist. Her expression was unreadable. No shock, no anger, Just that same icy poise she always wore like armor. I underestimated you, she said, almost admiringly. You're more your father's son than I thought. Mark's jaw tightened. I'm nothing like him. That's the difference. You let the past control you. I'm done letting it control me. As she was escorted out, Eleanor paused at the threshold of the grand sitting room, her voice echoing behind her. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is over, Mark. People like me, we always find a way back. Then she was gone. In the heavy silence that followed, Mark exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. The bag with the evidence slipped from his shoulder and hit the floor with a soft thud. Peter clapped a reassuring hand on his back. You did the right thing. Whatever your father did, it ends with you. Mark nodded slowly, staring at the grand fireplace, the place where Eleanor had once stood, weaving lies with a smile. He had walked into the marriage blind, unaware that it was forged from vengeance, but he wasn't leaving it the same man. A week later, the estate was quiet. Mark stood on the balcony overlooking the grounds, the morning mist curling across the lawn like smoke. He had begun the process of annulling the marriage. The media storm was still raging outside those walls, but inside, things were finally beginning to settle. He thought of Eleanor, not with hate, but with something more complex. Pity, understanding, maybe even sadness. She had built a life on bitterness and betrayal, and in trying to destroy him, she'd destroyed herself. But Mark was still standing. Mark walked through the estate one last time before handing it over to the legal authorities. As he passed Eleanor's study, he paused, glancing at the door she'd once slammed in his face. Then he reached into his pocket and took out the diary. With a quiet sigh, he tossed it into the fireplace. Flames consumed the pages. Revenge, heartbreak, manipulation, until nothing was left but ash. He turned and walked away, sunlight breaking through the gray clouds above the estate. This chapter was over, but Mark's story was just beginning. Officers led Eleanor away, and she turned back to Mark one last time. You may think you've won, Mark, she said, her voice laced with finality, but revenge isn't so easily undone. Be careful, it doesn't consume you too. Mark watched her disappear, a mix of relief and sadness washing over him. He had exposed the truth and protected himself, but the weight of Eleanor's parting words lingered. Was she right? Would the shadow of their past ever truly fade? The sharp bang of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of Eleanor Brooks's trial. Mark sat silently in the back row, watching the woman he once loved face the consequences of her actions. Despite everything, his testimony had helped reduce her sentence, not out of sympathy, but because he understood the complexity of their shared history. Eleanor turned briefly in her seat, her gaze meeting his for the first time. There was no trace of the cold calculation that had defined her before, only a faint, almost apologetic nod. Days later, Mark was summoned to the estate one final time. The grand house, once imposing and isolating, now felt hollow. Eleanor had arranged for him to receive the deed to the property. The estate lawyer handed him a letter, written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. It was never about the money, Mark, the letter read. It was about closure. Harold deserved justice, but I lost sight of what truly mattered. You've shown me something I thought I'd forgotten, the ability to move forward. This estate is no longer a monument to my pain. It can be something more. Use it well. Mark sold the estate, a decision that came easily. Its grandeur had been a gilded cage for both him and Eleanor. The proceeds allowed him to pay off his family's debts, finally freeing his mother from the shadow of his father's mistakes. With the remainder of the funds, Mark established a scholarship fund in Harold Brooks's name, a way to honor the man who had unwittingly become a casualty in the feud between two families. Returning to law school felt like coming home. This time, Mark was more determined than ever to use his education for good. He interned at a legal aid center, helping individuals who, like Eleanor once had been wronged and left without recourse. One crisp autumn afternoon, a letter arrived for Mark. The handwriting was unmistakable. He sat on a park bench near campus and unfolded the paper. Mark, the letter began, I've had much time to reflect. For years, I believed revenge would heal the wounds Harold's death left behind. But I see now that revenge is its own prison. Your kindness, even in the face of my mistakes, taught me something I never expected. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. Thank you for being better than the world around you. Thank you for showing me that we can break the cycles we inherit. I hope you find the happiness I never could. Mark stared at the letter for a long time, the words sinking in. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket, feeling an odd sense of peace. A year after Eleanor's arrest, Mark stood before a group of scholarship recipients at a small ceremony. Behind him hung a simple plaque, the Harold Brooks Scholarship Fund for Second Chances. Mark spoke with conviction. This fund isn't just about money. It's about creating opportunities for those who might otherwise be forgotten. It's about turning pain into purpose. After the ceremony, he sat alone for a moment, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past year. His path had been irrevocably altered, but for the first time, he felt he was walking in the right direction. Mark walked away from the ceremony with a soft smile on his face. He glanced up at the clear sky, feeling the weight of the past finally lifting. Eleanor's letter remained in his pocket, a quiet reminder of the lessons they both had learned: redemption, justice, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of resilience, redemption, and forgiveness. Mark's story reminds us that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, the choices we make can lead us to healing and new beginnings. If this story touched your heart and left you inspired, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends and loved ones. Let's spread the message of hope and second chances far and wide. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories for more heartfelt tales that move your soul and remind us all of the power of compassion, forgiveness, and love. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time with another soul-stirring story. Until then, take care and remember to cherish the lessons life brings.